Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Lisa Jacobson, and I'm president of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, and I'm really pleased to welcome everybody to today's discussion, The Future of Decarbonization, Cleantech Solutions to Watch. Selfishly, for the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, we're very happy to have the time to learn about the technologies and hear about the innovations in the marketplace. You're going to hear from 4 of our members and partners today, and definitely different technologies and different pathways, but all coming together towards 1.5 degrees. And that's where we are today. We're in the 1.5 degrees Pathways Pavilion, and we're really happy to partner with the Climate Registry on the programming here at COP28 and the opportunity to be here with you today in their pavilion. The Business Council for Sustainable Energy is a broad-based energy trade association. We're based in Washington, D.C., and most of our work is focused on adoption of federal policy. We want to see federal policy adopted so that we can deploy technologies more affordably, faster, and to make sure that more communities are benefiting from these technologies. The business leaders you're going to hear from today work all over the world, also bring a lot of expertise and different backgrounds to our conversation. My hope is that we will learn more about each of their technologies, learn about what some of their challenges and opportunities are, and what they're looking to accomplish here at COP28. So with that, let's get to it. I'm going to welcome our first speaker, Sundis Cordelia Ramli, and she is with an amazing clean hydrogen technology company, Topso, working for Power to X. So Sundis, please join me. Well, good afternoon. Let me just make sure I'm on and folks can hear me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Wonderful to have you here. I think I'm going to ask each of the speakers this to start. Where are you living? Where did you come from? You know, here we are in Dubai. Where did you arrive from?
Yeah, so I arrived from Copenhagen in Denmark,
Okay.
so it wasn't such a long journey for me compared to you guys coming from the US.
Well, good.
Pretty
Well,
short.
interesting way, icebreaker for each one of them. We're, as I said, based in Washington, D.C., so we're just starting to get winter, and now we are having a little bit of summer here in Dubai. I imagine you're experiencing the same thing in
I'm loving it.
Copenhagen.
I come from Malaysia originally, so for me
Okay.
it's like, this is home.
It's a little back to normal. So, let's talk a little bit about Topso and Power to X. So tell me about the company and what you do there, and,
Yeah.
we'll ask some other questions after that.
Cool. Okay, so I think maybe a little bit background of who Topso is. Topso is a 80-year-old company. It was founded by a guy called Dr. Haldo Topso. He was one of these super genius guys who rubbed shoulders with Niels Bohr, if you know the Bohr is in the atom, etc. And he was one of these guys who wanted to solve world's challenges. And it started off with there was a problem with food and not having enough food for the world, and therefore, how do you solve that? You should have better ammonia production. So he did that. He made a lot of technologies that was going to make efficient ammonia plants. And then the next part of the second to third decade of his career was about we have a lot of pollution in the world because of the coal power plants. What do we do there? Let's make a technology that cleans the air. Then after that, it was about, okay, now we need renewable fuels. What do we do there? And this decade is all about climate change and how do we decarbonize the carbon emissions that we have out there. And all the technologies that we work with, that we reinvest into R&D, et cetera, it's all about how can we make impact towards climate change. And so Power to X is actually a business unit in Topso, so we have our own CEO, our own CCO, and Power to X, for the ones who don't know what Power to X is, Power to X essentially is the coupling between electrification, so renewable energy, and what we call the hard-to-abate sectors. So if you think about, everybody knows electrification. Everybody knows that if you put more renewable energy out there, we can support climate change, etc. But not everything can just be directly electrified. If you think about the cars that you drive today, sure, you can have battery-powered cars, and therefore you could electrify it. If you think about the planes that you arrived today, you need other types of fuels. If you think about the fertilizers that you use for food, to make food, etc., you need a different form of chemical and fuels. You think about the ships that transport all of the different things around the world, you need to use fuels as well. So you don't directly electrify this. And then you have all these other really highly energy intensive sectors, like the steel industry. What do you do there? Today we're using fossil fuels in order to make steel. However, we could replace that with green hydrogen. So there's a lot of different things. So essentially, Power-to-X is taking power, using a device called an electrolyzer, converting that power into molecules. And these molecules can then be put directly into these hard-to-abate sectors and reduce the amount of carbon emissions out there.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So, just for others, what if you didn't use an electrolyzer? How is there any other way to have clean hydrogen, or is it really that the only pathway?
No, so I mean, I think you have to define what clean energy is as well, right? We call it low carbon. So if you want to have, of course, the lowest carbon or the most net zero would be using an electrolyzer, meaning that you use renewable electricity to convert the power into hydrogen. You could also use natural gas as well, whereby you do the production of blue hydrogen and you capture the carbon that you produce and in the form of CCUS. And that's also what we call low carbon, and it's part of the transition energy as well.
Thank you for that, because in the United States, where we are, as you're probably very familiar, we have a new tax regime, and there's a new hydrogen production tax credit. So these issues are very front of mind as we await more guidance on how it will be implemented. So getting a little bit more technical, can you tell me a little bit about Topsoe's solid oxide electrolyzer cell?
SOEC, make it easier.
that would be easier. Thank you.
Exactly. No, it's funny, but I can't say it out loud. No, so if you think about all the different electrolyzer technologies out there, you can probably, there are a lot of new ones. There's also, let me talk about the two most mature. You've got the alkaline technology, and alkaline is a technology that's been there for generations, decades. And then you have PEM, and then you also have, of course, all the sort of what we call the newer ones, whereby the SOEC is the most mature out of those newer ones. And the difference between the three and what SOEC is, the SOEC is it basically uses or takes advantage of very high temperature. And when you use high temperature, it means your conversion efficiency is higher. So essentially what that means is that for every megawatt that you need if you use a traditional alkaline, for example, you would actually have 30% efficiency if you use SOEC. So you would use less power to convert the same amount of molecules if you use SOEC instead of the other electrolyzers. That's why it's such a cool technology, because as you know, the bill out of renewable energy has to be massive, and it still has to be. And it's all about, efficiency is the most important thing out there, right? Having higher performance and higher conversion efficiency means that we'll be able to produce more green molecules as well.
Thank you. So when you think about getting that, more scaled up and deployed, what are some of well, maybe start, and we'll just talk a little bit about your markets right now and kind of where you are in your cycle, and then, what are some of the challenges you face?
I think we are, what most people know or probably don't know actually, is that Power-to-X industry is literally at the start. There is only a few projects out there, handful, large projects that has taken financial investment decision. A lot of projects this year went from feasibility into FEED, and therefore it is such a new area completely. What's really important is that we need to be able to just get those projects out there in order to get the learnings and data coming in. So when we talk about the perceived risk, which is the first one, cost is still very, very high, but we are comparing the cost of green products to the cost of fossil fuel products, and there's not really a level playing field there neither. And in order to bring the cost down, you need to have projects out there in order to start the supply chain. A lot of these projects are, when you do a feasibility study, everyone's like, yeah, we can bring the cost of methanol to, I don't know, $3 US per kilogram or whatever it is, right? But that's not true, because once you actually do a full design package and you go into construction, you realize that cost is much higher. But that's also because there isn't an industry out there yet. So that's one of the biggest challenges, not enough in the supply chain there. The supply chain will start to focus on this if there is enough demand. The other perceived risk is that the technology is not there, or the technology has a perceived risk because it is new. A lot of the technology that we're providing, what we call on the back end, so the ammonia, the methanol, etc., they're not new technologies. They're all technologies that are being applied into a new world. The electrolyzer is a new technology, definitely, and therefore it needs to have some very different conditions in terms of how do we actually assess the risks of deploying this technology. But again, we can't wait and sit down and do a bunch of pilot projects, and then a decade passes, and then we're too late. So we need to be able to start thinking differently on how do we perceive risks that is not in the traditional way of project financing, as you do in renewables and in other types of projects. You need to look at it differently, otherwise there'll be no projects out there, and therefore we will not solve climate change at all. Right?
So what are you hearing on the demand side? What are your customers telling you about the opportunity they see with this technology?
Yeah. They see a huge demand. Also, all the analysts, they predict massive demand out there. But essentially, there's a huge problem with offtake. There is no real off-takers out there. There's no real off-takers. The banks and the financiers and investors, they would like to have a bankable project. Bankability means having a minimum 10-year long-term offtake agreement. The off-takers are not ready to take that risk because there is no clarity and certainty. So it is a huge problem. There is a few projects out there that has the ability to take financial investment decision because the off-taker are also the owners of the project. So this is like NEOM, H2 Green Steel. We have a project that's in construction right now in the north of Sweden called Flagship 1 with Ørsted and recently with Breakthrough Energy. And that did not have an offtake agreement. It was pure, let's have first move advantage. Let's get this project off the ground, and then we will figure it out after. And they have done it, right? So right now they're in a really good position because they're one of the first movers to build a plant like this. So I think from a governmental side, there is the whole thing about incentives and subsidies, which is really great, but having demand mandates is also very important. If you don't put the demand mandates out there saying that you need to, every building you build with steel has to have X amount of green steel, no one's going to produce that amount.
Right. I mean, we've certainly seen that in the U.S. with the hydrogen hub project applications. And that wasn't all set up 6-8 months ago. So there was a lot of work done, and a lot of work will come to create these hydrogen economies, not just in different parts of the United States, but in different parts of the world. So we are here at COP28. Tell me a little bit about your agenda here and who you're talking with, what you'd like to see come out of your time here.
I'm looking for pioneers who walk the talk. I'm looking for partners and collaborators who's willing to have an open conversation about how do we look at risk allocation as well. So when we talk about partnerships in Topsoe, we talk about partnerships with our customers, of course, the one who will use our technology to build the plant. But we also talk about partnerships with the supply chain as well. But most importantly, where COP28 becomes very important because the network is very big here, is the enablers. So these are the off-takers, these are the financing communities, these are the insurers out there, because they are the ones going to assess these projects, and they hold the key to scale these type of projects faster.
Well, I know this is just your first day, so you're just about to have all these conversations, but what really seems different to me about this COP versus others is the fact that you actually have such a strong showing of the business community, and here we are, we're at a hub in the U.S. for policymakers at the state and local level, here at this pavilion in particular, and the investment community. So I think, unlike even recent COPs where they've had that element, this one I think is doing it at a much bigger scale. So that'll be hopefully very productive for you. So, for our audience, again, may not be that familiar with clean hydrogen and the work that you're doing. Any last thoughts, things that we didn't talk about that you think, or closing comments that would be important for our viewers and our audience to be aware of?
I think the most important thing is to learn what you do every single day and where does that energy source comes from. Because the more people understand every day that, we all know the cars we drive, but we have no idea that the oats that you eat in Denmark every morning, I tell my kids this, these oats, the fertilizer is black. In order to decarbonize that, you need to have green fertilizer. But people don't have that understanding because it's not visible. So I think the more that you understand what Power to X means, what is hard to abate sectors? Why is it hard? Why is it hard to electrify? The more people can speak to their mayors and community members, etc., and then therefore policies can be changed. So I think that would be it. Google it or use ChatGPT. What is Power to X?
Right. Okay. Power to X.
Yeah.
Remember that. Power to X. Okay. Well, this has really been wonderful. I'm so grateful for your time. I wish you a very productive week ahead. And again, thanks for sharing Power to X and Topso's journey with us.
Perfect. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you.
Okay. Hi. Oh, there I go. I'm back again. All right. Wonderful. Okay. So that was terrific. I'm very excited too about our speaker number 2. We have Rasha Hassanin, Chief Product and Sustainability Officer at Aspen Technology. And we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about digital technologies and the work that you do with Aspen Tech. So first, let's talk a little. Oh, no, I need to ask you, where did you fly in from if you flew? Here, hold on a second.
Oh, there it is. Can you hear me now? I did fly.
Yeah.
I flew in from the U.S. Aspen Technologies is based in Boston, and we have offices obviously in Houston, in Paris, and globally. So Reading in the U.K. and globally. But I flew in from the U.S.
Okay, good. Now that we got that taken care of, let's talk about Aspen Tech and your role there.
Absolutely. So again, for those of you that don't know, Aspen Technologies is a 40-year-old software company. We've been in the process optimization, modeling, and simulation business for a very long time. The company started out as a project at MIT called the Aspen Project that was looking at electrochemical processes and how to model them and simulate them in a way that would allow companies, in our case, chemical companies, to de-risk big projects and then optimize them over time. And so the idea is you can lay out a process with a feedstock and an outcome, and then you can do a whole bunch of simulations around alternatives and scenarios that give you the best outcome. Then once you've designed and built the project, you can then install software that works across the entire process to optimize it using the existing controls. And so that's what we do. After that, Aspen Technologies then added asset performance management, so then you can maintain all of your assets. And then last year, we added grid optimization. So now we optimize all the way, we call it from the electron to the molecule.
Okay, so we talked about optimization. Let's talk about decarbonization. So
bet.
how does this fit into a decarbonization strategy?
That's a great question, Lisa. So there are so many ways you can think about decarbonization. Hard to abate sectors are incredibly complex. We heard yesterday at the acceleration of a just and orderly transition that we heard Dr. Jabber talk about hard to abate sectors, why they're complex, why they're capital intensive. We heard that from the last speaker as well. What digital solutions do to help decarbonize is that they make that complexity relatively simple, and they start by improving efficiency, and not just energy efficiency and the footprint, but resource efficiency. So in a big process, you can say, hey, what if I recycled this? Or what if I used this waste heat? You could model that, and you could see what the outcomes were. And for 40 years, Aspen Tech did that to improve costs. Well, as the role of hard-to-abate industries became very clear as it related to sustainability, we started to think about how do I then optimize for emissions? How do I minimize emissions in addition to optimizing costs? So energy efficiency and resource efficiency is I would say, the lowest hanging fruit. And digitizing an existing set of infrastructures is the easiest way to do it, right? Because there's no additional capital investment. It's really about making the best out of what you have. Next, you then start to look at all of these alternative pathways. So you can talk about green hydrogen, you can talk about CCUS, you can talk about the use of bio feedstock, whether it's for fuels or for chemicals. So all of these pathways are new and they're risky. And in order for us to be able to actually accelerate that innovation, the best way to do it is to model it, to simulate it using software. Because then you don't have to build anything. There's no capital investment. You can say, what if I used methane to produce hydrogen, and I use CCUS using a very traditional method? That's great. That's your kind of blue hydrogen. What if I then compared that with using an electrolyzer? What if I used this type of electrolyzer versus that type of electrolyzer? What if I used a different chemical process to take methane and produce hydrogen? What if I use something called pyrolysis, which instead of producing CO2 produces solid carbon? Right now I don't have to abate the CO2. Well, that's an early stage process. How do I can simulate that over and over, and I can do a number of scenarios and come up with the one that has the best cost, the lowest risk, and the best output. And I can do that without a single dollar being spent on a capital project. And so with AspenTech software, what we've done is we've introduced about 140 sustainability modules. They're examples. They're just case studies of what you could do to make a process more sustainable, what you could do for hydrogen, what you could do for CCUS. And a lot of the big projects are using our software to do that. And so when you start to think about the possibilities, right, you can use relatively low-risk software to de-risk these projects.
So, and I have to admit, I had a little sneak peek. Yesterday, I went to visit your exhibit, which is in the green zone for those that are here in the room. And, you had an amazing exhibit where you had really terrific case studies of all different types of projects and customers. But so the bottom line is, there's a lot of talk about AI. I mean, is this available today? And,
Yes.
talk about that.
Absolutely. So, in fact, I was just having this conversation yesterday. When you hear about digital solutions and sustainability, you hear about two things. You hear about carbon reporting and something that's all the way out there, and maybe it's AI or maybe it's something else. And there's this whole class of software, which is what we call operational technology, software that's available today that has been used maybe for other purposes or for similar purposes, that's easily repurposed to meet our decarbonization goals. I'll give you an example. AspenTech has a solution called digital grid management. Digital grid management allows you to dynamically manage a power grid. Imagine what is needed in order to put utility scale renewables onto an existing power grid. What about distributed renewables? Well, that software was originally used to reroute power. Now, that software is being used by some of the world's biggest grids with phenomenal amounts of renewables. We can talk about the US, about 40% of the US grid is powered by AspenTech digital grid management solutions. The brand is OSI. 100% of the grid in India. This is software that's available today, has been available, is already powering grids, and is already being utilized to manage grids with high degrees of renewable on there. Imagine a world where now I have hard to abate industry captive power. And typically captive power is fossils. So I have a big steel mill or I have a big chemical plant and I need to have power. So I have my own power plant, and typically that's fossils. Now I want to add renewables because I have my own net zero goal. Now that microgrid is a lot more complex than it was. All of a sudden you can then leverage the software to allow you to minimize the emissions of whatever it is you're producing. You use the renewables when they're available, you use the fossils and then abate when it's less available. And so this is the type of thing that's available today, that's out in the market. It's being used, and if we adopted this type of technology across the board, we could make a lot of headroom quickly and buy time for some of these newer technologies to mature and become available and scale. And we could do it with relatively low barriers to entry.
So then what would you say are the biggest barriers right now, given what you just described?
I think the biggest barriers are, I think one is awareness. For digital technologies, it's not easily tangible, right? So it's not like I can see an electrolyzer or I can feel, a CCUS plant. It's sort of stuff in the middle. And so it's really about awareness. It's really about people understanding what can be accomplished and sort of coming out and trying it out and then scaling it quickly. So I think that to me is the biggest one. I think there's a lot of noise in the market today about these really cool and exciting technologies, as there should be. And I think a lot of times we forget that there's things available today that can be implemented. We think about it as sort of old school type opportunities, but no, they're actually really cool. We've embedded AI into our software as well, but we've embedded it in a way that where it adds incremental value versus sort of AI everywhere. It's a very sort of measured approach to AI. So you start to see these things come to fruition, and the companies that are using our software are actually getting the benefits. And so I think that's really the key, is really making sure that people that are in these industries, that the leaders that are in the industries, that policymakers start to understand the value of digital technology. I would wrap by saying, I think the third big barrier to entry is a lot of policy doesn't take into account digital technology. So we focus on green hydrogen, or we focus on CCUS, and a lot of policymakers don't realize that, hey, we could have provisions in there that would incent the adoption of digital technologies faster, and allow that adoption to happen. They just don't think, again, they don't think about it. So you see a lot more focus on digital technologies and policy, like in Europe, for example, but in other places, US, Asia, Latin America, you see it a lot less. They're much more focused on the big sort of tangible technologies versus digital technologies. And so I think it's a matter of educating policymakers and making sure that policy reflects all of the technology that's available today. And I think that this COP has made a big stride with the focus on energy efficiency as a big driver, which we saw yesterday.
Yeah, we had a pledge that was adopted,
Exactly
a pledge
right.
that we're also working to support, both for renewables and energy efficiency. And the energy efficiency one, we want to see a doubling of the rate of energy efficiency improvements by 2030.
Yep.
So I'm glad we had, I think, 117 plus countries affiliate
118.
with
118 as of last night.
Okay, good. Well, maybe there'll be even more in a few days. Okay, so we're about to close.
Yeah.
I guess, what are your priorities for COP? What does success look like to you when you get back on that plane?
For me, it's really around raising the visibility of digital technologies as a viable sustainability pathway that can be applied now, and having tangible sort of progress on the inclusion of software and digital technologies in climate policy moving forward. I know it's very ambitious. I won't get it all at this COP, but I'm hoping in the next couple.
Good. Well, I hope you will join us wherever we are for
Absolutely.
COP 29, and we can talk about progress. But yeah, Rasha, wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you
so
so
much for
much.
being here, and look forward to learning more about Aspen Tech's work in the future. So,
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay, we have our speaker number 3 about to join us. Come on up, Julia Soder, Chief Executive. I have Julia next, if that's okay. Jean, I had you as number 4, so okay. Let's go with Julia. Julia, great to see you, by the way. So Julia Soder, she's Chief Executive Officer for the Long Duration Energy Storage Council. We had an opportunity to do a video conversation at COP27
last year.
in
Flew by.
Egypt, right? So it's good to be with you here. So we are making this a regular thing. So that's great. So tell me where you flew or drove from or trained or where are you coming from?
I was supposed to come from Europe actually, but I had a passport issue, so I flew in from Seattle.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I got here.
Glad you're here. Okay, good. So, yeah, let's talk about the Long Duration Energy Storage Council and what your priorities are here at the COP.
Thank you, Lisa, and it's great to see you again. And it's really fun to have a year fly by so fast with so much happen in between. And this is a big COP for us. It's actually our second anniversary. The long duration energy storage was launched at COP26, highlighting a $4 trillion U.S. marketplace, U.S. dollar marketplace for addressing long duration energy storage. That we need that if we are going to do this tripling of renewables and doubling of energy efficiency, we have to have 8 terawatts of LDES, and we can't do this alone. And so we set up this global organization, which is a nonprofit. We're based in Brussels, but we have members all over the world. And what we're representing are the 4 families of long duration energy storage. So thermal, the heat, the rocks, the volcanic, the cement, the recycled aluminum, the mechanical, pumped hydro, compressed air, liquid air, the electrochemical, so batteries other than lithium ion, because that's short duration and we need that too, but everything else on the periodic table. So
You went through a lot of things there.
did.
Can I ask you to say that again?
Sure.
I
No,
mean,
good
I know
point.
a lot about pumped hydropower storage
Yeah.
because we work very closely with that industry, but say
Sure.
all those things
and
again,
I'll slow down
please.
because I ran over here and I'm still charged up from the 6 coffees.
Being charged up is good, but
Exactly.
Yeah.
The duration needs to, yeah. So 4 families of long duration energy storage. So mechanical, which has pumped hydro, which has been around for a century, is really kind of the grandparents of long duration energy storage, but also has compressed air, which has been around for a couple decades, and then also liquid air. So that's everything that kind of deals with gravity. And then we have the thermal energy storage. So this is the volcanic rocks, the salts, the aluminum, the recycled iron, anything that you can use to heat up and store for days, months, and even years. And a lot of the thermal energy storage is being used to make green steel, green cement, green aluminum, and in the industrial sectors. And then we have electrochemical, so the batteries, but not lithium ion because that's short duration. So the periodic table of zinc and vanadium and magnesium and calcium and many other minerals that are very safe, environmentally friendly, used to hold charges for 10, 100 hours, iron. And then last but not least, chemical, which is hydrogen. We focus on green hydrogen. And so those 4 families we all work on together. But our members also include the entire economy and ecosystem of long duration. So the equipment manufacturers, the data centers, the utilities, developers, the investors. So we have everyone that really wants to own, operate, invest, and build. Every sector, agriculture, transportation, aviation, all of this is in long duration energy storage.
right. So it's not just about the power sector or renewables, but can you talk first a little bit about the connection with the renewables industry? I mean, not everyone may really understand that interplay.
Right.
So if you could talk a little bit about that as well as the other applications, that would be terrific.
Great question, because renewables can't survive and work 24/7 without long duration energy storage. So we have a very loving partnership to really support each other as we do this tripling of renewables that was just discussed. A huge pledge. We are at 118, hopefully 120 by the end of today. So 120 countries stepping up to really promote that we need, 11 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. That's 6 years. And we cannot achieve that without long duration energy storage, providing the electricity and heat. And the heat side is really important because we keep talking about these hard to abate sectors, but we can really provide the heat and the steam and replace gas plants and replace diesel power plants and backup generators with long duration energy storage. So that's the critical solution to the decarbonization.
So sticking with the power sector for a moment, how can battery technology help with the grid? What's the grid issue? I mean, you talked about it a little there, and then how do batteries fit in?
Batteries do a fantastic job of providing ancillary services. So keeping the lights on when you might have solar that works for one day but not the next day. So capturing that solar and then using it again 10 hours later. Or if you have wind offshore, onshore that really was blowing hard for 6 hours, but all of a sudden here comes your big peak demand because everyone just got home and is now wanting to use all their electricity in their house or their homes and the communities. There's nothing there because the wind just dropped off. But if you have long duration energy storage and those batteries up and running, connected to your grid or your home, then you can have the electricity you need to power your utilities and your livelihood for the next 8, 10 hours, 20, even 24 hours. There are batteries that can do 100 hours. And so this is really exciting to see the sustainability side too, is that we're not only recycling renewable power, but we're also recycling all the, kind of attributes that make this sustainable.
So here we are at COP. We talked about the pledge, and that might be something we want to spend a little more time on. But what are your main objectives while you're here?
So the Long Duration Energy Storage Council is part of a broader organization called the Global Renewables Alliance. And we have a pavilion over in B2 Building 17, completely opposite sides. So it's a great kind of way to see all of the wonderful communities here at COP. And it really is energizing to run across and be connected to all the global communities. So we're partnering with IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Association, that is really working on promoting how are we going to implement the tripling of renewables. What does this actually look like, and increase of energy efficiency? So the Global Renewables Alliance brings together wind, solar, hydropower, geothermal, green hydrogen, and long duration energy storage. So the 6 industry organizations came together to create the Global Renewables Alliance, and we are showing that we have a new industry really here to implement and change the goals and policies and start producing results to meet the tripling pledge.
That's a game changer because I've been in this process for a while and also obviously work at the policy level to deploy technologies. And the Business Council is a multi-sector organization. But that's one of the biggest challenges because a lot of our policies, and maybe at certain times rightly so, we're very industry specific. But for us to really make this transformation, it really is a system approach and an integrated approach. But the fact that that would have happened here on the industry level as a coalition is really exciting. And, maybe that's why we've had some of this early success with the pledge, because the policymakers can see, this is really a broad effort, and it's one that's well thought out because it's thinking about the whole implementation pathway. So we are in the 1.5 Pathways Pavilion, and again, a lot of the key partners and constituents here are state and local government folks. So in the United States predominantly, but we don't have to limit it to the United States. But what are your messages for them, and what are the barriers that they might be able to work to overcome?
Great question, because we hear a lot about different perspectives here all over COP of industry and regulators and policymakers and decision makers. And what was great was on this last panel, a lot of developers and industry CEOs asked them, well, if you were a regulator or policymaker, what would you want to do or know to really make the changes happen? And they expressed market criteria as being really key, and then defining what bankable means and bankability to different sectors. And when you do that, what incentives do you need? We're not asking for subsidies. It's more of a public-private partnership. So then outlining what that looks like. And so we need market changes to really show the value stack of what long duration energy storage can provide. Because in today's market, 1 or 2 things are given credit, but not the 15, 20 things that you can actually save consumers money by showing that long duration energy storage can provide black starter capabilities, load following, inertia. So if we created a market that highlights this, that will really bring benefits to customers. And we also wanted to demonstrate that planning, permitting, and siting really need to be kind of coordinated in a better way that includes a very upfront first stop shop working with community leaders on what do communities want for renewable energy facilities or long duration storage in their neighborhoods, and trying to really maximize co-benefits. And then also working on, we have the financing, really making sure that we unlock a lot of the just initial bias that's out there, that we don't have the funds that we do. There's trillions of dollars and pounds and euros sitting out there in the world, but we just need to unlock more doors. And so if there's regulatory certainty, then that really provides more market access.
Right. Well, I mean, it's similar to some degree of what we just heard from our previous speaker with digital technologies, right? You know, the regulations weren't drafted anticipating long duration energy storage, and so they might not have a tariff or a regulatory structure where you're getting that financial value for the service that you can provide, right? So that's really helpful to explain for folks. When you talk to investors, I mean, what do they ask you about?
They want to know how they can be part of de-risking the energy transition. And then some investors will bring in a long list of elements to check off. But once we start going through them, these are not any of the things that tie to long duration energy storage. So it's almost asking to reformat the existing templates to add the different criteria to show the value add. We're also looking at what type of additional guarantees can be given and credit worthiness and how that's defined. Being allowed to partner with government organizations, public-private partnerships, really expand the portfolio of who can come to the table. So, you know, it's great that the conversations are happening. There's a lot of interest because this is such a huge economic gain for those who invest in long-duration energy storage. It's a huge value add, and I think what we're really trying to say is take the initial step up front because the payout is so much more as you go forward. If you don't take this step, then the costs are 10 to 50 times more than what it would be for the value add. So we're really just trying to flip the conversation to say that there's so much value add if you start now. It's a small risk for a long-term game.
Yeah, so we're kind of getting towards our last couple of questions, but I mean, when I think about long duration energy storage, I really think about communities and I think about households and small businesses and what the resilience benefits are, or in this forum too, what the adaptation benefits are. So I want to hear from your perspective, like how can long duration energy storage help communities adapt and be resilient in the face of climate impacts?
Three things come to my mind right away. Islands, front lines of a lot of the climate disruptions that are happening around the world and the injustices, and to really say that there are so many LDES technologies that can replace diesel generators and really provide a healthy environment. There are a lot of islands that have pumped hydro and really bringing floating solar to kind of help with water reduction and also just keeping kind of a nice partnership among what can be gained but also currently utilized. I'm also thinking of the wildfires around the world, you know, being able to, you know, use backup battery systems that are being used to, you know, keep electricity on for communities that want to charge their phone or have their medicine in their refrigerators or coolers kind of used. So there are a lot of different attributes to be used in microgrid systems, remote systems, and emergency systems that LDES can really benefit to the communities. And on the last point, public-private partnerships, letting communities own and operate LDES facilities and be part of the transition is really empowering.
Right. So for another longer topic conversation, we could talk about the new tax incentives that we have in the United States. I mean, I guess my last question would be, with some of those new elements that allow communities to participate in new ways, can they access that type of resource because and access energy storage technologies with that more, they call it elective pay or direct pay provision?
We hope so. I mean, what's been great with the IRA is the fact that there's a 30% storage tax credit. There is the incentive to build a lot of, you know, LDES facilities in the United States. I think we've had 7 gigafactories announced all over the United States just to really start building these initiatives. The jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs are being created, as well as community benefits. But yes, in our communities, in our backyards, we hope very soon to have LDES as part of our portfolio.
Great. Well, Julia, it's great to be with you. Let's do this again at the next COP, and congratulations on all you've accomplished in a year, and hope you have a really productive and fun COP.
Thank you, Lisa,
Thank
and
you.
thank you to you too. You're doing amazing work, so thank you and to your team.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. So we are now going to hear from our fourth speaker, Jean Gabalis, who's Chief Executive Officer of World Energy. So welcome, Jean. Hi, Jean.
Hello, Lisa.
Good to have you.
Great to be here.
I'm really excited for this conversation because we're just getting to know, as an organization, World Energy and learn more about your field. But before we hop into that, tell me where you arrived from and how did you get here?
So, like most of the 90,000 people that came, I came by airplane from Boston. But what's interesting is how many of us came by airplane and to a conference that is about decarbonization. And flying is a very carbon-intensive activity. And so I saw this. It was a comment on a public post about the hypocrisy of all of us flying to this conference to focus on decarbonization, as if we were going to all stare into Zoom screens and figure anything out. So yes, I flew like everybody else flew, and I did it with a clear conscience because the only way we're going to innovate is to do it face to face. But what I think we're going to end up talking about a little bit is how can we do this in a more responsible way, and so yeah.
Let's get into it. How do we do it in a more responsible way? Tell me a little bit about World Energy's history and what you're focused on right now.
So World Energy's been around for 25 years. We started out in advanced biofuels, and we kind of have just followed one thing after another. And for us, rather than sitting in a lab trying to figure out what we ought to do someday, we're a company that's just always acted and iterated and acted and iterated and over and over and over again, and have been doing that for 25 years, and I expect we'll be doing it for another 25 years. And so part of our journey started out with ground fuels and then moved to aviation-based fuels, and we'll get into sustainable aviation fuel in a second. But our move to sustainable aviation fuel got us focusing on how can we decarbonize the fuel that we're producing more effectively, and that got us focusing on hydrogen. And then as we were focused on hydrogen, we thought, okay, how can we do that within the traditional steam methane reformer environment? But now that the early steps are being taken on green hydrogen, what can we do there? And that led us to focus on what we knew about the path to green hydrogen and what was going to make that effective. So anyway, the long and short after all these initiatives, we've got a refinery in Los Angeles that's producing, was first commercial producer of sustainable aviation fuel in the United States, one of the first in the world, and that plant is where a lot of the market innovations for sustainable aviation fuel are being built. We've got a second plant on the books in Houston. We have not broken ground on that facility, but we're working hard towards that objective. And then we've got this green hydrogen initiative on the west coast of Newfoundland in Canada, and that's kind of our biggest and most recent initiative.
So from a business perspective, I mean, you talked about the journey you went through. I mean, are those two sectors like in your business strategy related, or are they two really important, distinct businesses that will serve different applications and customers?
Well, it's interesting. So we think about all these technologies sometimes as independent of each other, whether it's carbon capture or whether it's clean hydrogen, whatever the type of clean hydrogen it is, or biofuels, or first-generation biofuels and next-generation biofuels. One of the earlier speakers from Topso was talking about power to X, and we're on a 25-year learning journey, and that learning curve is just is accelerating. But what we're seeing is the same patterns in one after another area, and the integration of technology. A lot of, for example, there is some criticism of biofuels as a path to clean aviation or decarbonizing aviation, with an interest in going to e-fuels. There are various names for fuels that are derived from renewable energy, renewable power, renewable electrons, and so for those of us who are in the field, we understand that the way you get to second generation sustainable aviation fuel is to start with first generation, and they become a great complement to the second generation. So as we're working on clean hydrogen, which is the backbone of e-fuels, it becomes a really good integration from first generation to next generation. And so in the work we're doing in Houston, we're looking at co-locating a bio-based first generation plant with a second generation plant co-located attached to it. When we're looking at that, we can significantly reduce the cost of the second generation facility by coupling it with the first.
That was really helpful. Now I see the connection that you've made, and so let's talk a little bit about, and it could be in either sector, what some of the challenges that you see out there in the marketplace, and any thoughts on solutions to overcome them.
Yeah, the biggest the biggest challenge in all of this stuff is who's going to pay for it and why. If I go back to what I said at the start about 90,000 people flying here, if there were ready solutions that we knew were effective and readily available, would some of those 90,000 choose to fly here in a decarbonized fashion? I think so. How many? I don't know. But our solutions are about $250 a met ton right now. At $250 a met ton, you get from New York to London at about 130 bucks incremental cost. So many of us flew not in the back of the plane. So many of us flew in business or first class. And the incremental cost, I know for my flight, was $10,000. So put the $10,000 cost in context of the $130, and that's just New York to London. So do that again, call it $260 by the time you get here. And so $260 of incremental cost in context of a $10,000 moving towards the front of the plane is relatively modest. And if you're going to a conference, if you're going to COP, and you're going there with all of the best intentions of collaborating towards making real breakthroughs, wouldn't you want to do that? I think so. So when we talk about the challenges of what we do, I think they're the challenges of what most of us do here at COP. What we're doing is trying to find market mechanisms to unleash the economic power of change.
Right. Well, that's very thought-provoking, what you just said. What are some market instruments that you think would either on the consumer side or maybe public-private partnership or a regulator? Again, we are in an audience of state and local policymakers. Could a governor do something, or or is it no? It can be completely market-driven. What would you think would be a good way to address that?
Well, it's going to be an unsatisfactory answer, I think, because I think we've grown so used to let's go to government X to get the answer that I've been focused on a kind of a different answer. What can we do without government X, whether it's a state government or federal government or local government? What can we do? And what can businesses do? And the power of businesses to drive change is really really at its infancy. But where's the biggest progress coming from? It's coming from companies that have made net zero commitments and mean it. Those are the ones that are willing to pay more to get something off the ground. And what new technology ever started as cheaper than its alternative? Very few, very few. So in our case, in aviation, we've been told for years that as soon as you can provide us sustainable aviation fuel at the price of fossil fuel, we'll buy all you can make. Well, no kidding. Who wouldn't rather have the better wine at the price of the cheaper wine? Who wouldn't want the better product at the price of the cheaper product? Clearly, it's a better product if you can offer your customers decarbonized flight. Why wouldn't you pay for that? Well, you wouldn't pay for it because you don't have an easy way to monetize that. And so what we're at the very early stages of doing is putting together the capability to create an ecosystem in which everything we do is third-party verifiable, it's traceable, it's all run through third-party registries, And so you can know for certain, down to the last digit, what the decarbonization that you bought. We're not talking. We don't sell to a consulting firm or a tech firm. We don't sell them fuel. We sell them the decarbonization that came from the fuel. And so these early steps in creating inset markets, not offset markets, but inset markets, which means in-sector reductions. These early steps apply to everything. And the really interesting thing is when you think about any molecule, decarbonization with any molecule, the farther you move the molecule, the more that you're kind of defeating the purpose of the decarbonized molecule. It costs carbon and it costs money to move that around. So if you think about what we're doing in Newfoundland, Newfoundland is it is part of the same province as Labrador. Labrador has some of the highest quality iron ore in the world. So right near where we're creating green hydrogen, we've got the access to very high quality iron ore, which we can bring to our site in Stephenville, process on site through direct reduction of iron, decarbonize at that site, then supply that iron into the marketplace, wherever it normally would go. But take that decarbonization and sell it to wherever it needs to go. So if it's a car company in Japan, you don't have to send the iron all the way across the world. You should be able to sell that decarbonization just as well to a car company in Japan or Tokyo or China or Germany or Italy or wherever, the United States. It doesn't matter. So that when we start to look at how do we do decarbonization in an efficient way, you have to decouple the work of the molecule from the molecule itself. And so I really think that when we think about innovation, we're so often thinking about technological innovation. But I think the path forward is based in large measure to market innovation. How do you unleash the economics? And if you can do things efficiently, well, not everybody needs to use the absolute cheapest steel. Not everybody does use the cheapest steel. Not everybody has to take the cheapest flight. Not everybody does take the cheapest flight. So you can start to link up the service with those who most need that service.
So I'm sure you're having this kind of conversation in the halls here with many different types of individuals with different roles. I mean, when you put that forward, what are they asking you as the follow-up? You know, and also like, who do you want to talk to most about what you've just described?
So, you know, you asked me, the previous question was about policy. Obviously, policy matters a lot because policy coupled with private market voluntary action is what makes these markets go. But increasingly, as we're talking to corporations about how they're going to meet their net zero goals, they're having a really hard time in the areas that we work. It's very hard to decarbonize your flight. If you're a consulting firm, as much as 80 or 90% of your total emissions come from flying your consultants around. And you're not going to Zoom these meetings. It just doesn't work. We know that. This 3D discussion is so much better than if it was a 2D discussion. We know that. We have to meet each other. We have to be present with each other to make anything happen. And so the reactions we're getting are extremely enthusiastic. We're getting a very good response. There's a lot more demand than there is supply. So what I would say is most important is that we create an ecosystem that's built on high integrity. Because what somebody's buying is completely invisible. They're buying decarbonization is such kind of a vague notion. What is it if I'm buying decarbonization? And companies are paying tens of millions of dollars for this hard to touch, feel, understand stuff. It's critical that we build an ecosystem that's extremely high integrity. And then we don't worry about it. The number of activities that happen in the world that are based on ledger systems that we just trust. What is currency?
Right.
Currency is a book and claim system. That's all it is. It's a ledger system. But you trust when you put your paycheck into your account that when you fly to Dubai and you hit a bank machine, that money will come out. It's a book and claim system. So we have to build this book and claim system to work. And when it works with high integrity every single time and it's traceable, we will unleash so much power, so much innovation, so much capability, because you can efficiently buy your decarbonization wherever it can be most efficiently produced.
Right, and we have seen that with many. First of all, I think we work on this issue a lot in the United States at the federal level and also at the state level, and also with many of the carbon reporting and carbon disclosure regimes. And that's the first time I've really had somebody just put that example out, with the monetary system. And I think we need to take that more on the road, because people talk about book and claim, but I think for many people, they don't put it in that very understandable context. So yeah, I wish we had more time, Jean. I really enjoyed talking to you and learning more about world energy. I'm really glad that you're here at the COP, and look forward to talking with you hopefully at COP 29, right? And you'll have more to share about the evolution of the industry. So I thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Terrific. Thank you. And thank you to all of our speakers. We're going to end now and look forward to having the opportunity to share more technology innovations at COP29. Have a great rest of your day.